Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, not only did Kirby Smart punch his ticket to the national championship, but he also moved into a different conversation amongst college football coaches.
Now, the Falcons are down to their last game, one game for the rest of this 2021 season. But should QB1, RB1, or anyone sit?
And last but not least, and for the culture, he's a human being first.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
I just want to say thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. And remember, we're free and available wherever you download your podcast and wherever you download your podcast. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that from you in advance. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by Bet Online. If the folks want to find us on the big screen, they can download that Roku and Amazon Fire apps. Just look up Locked On Sports Atlanta, and we'll pop right up. You have access to all this good content we have right here just for you. All your ATL sports needs is right here on ATL Day Ones. Now, the Georgia Bulldogs, Kirby Smart, they punched the ticket to the Natty, right? They're going against the TCU Horned Frogs. It's so a 12-year-old in me wants to say horny frogs, but that's a whole nother conversation for a later date. But I think that when you think about all of the plays that led up to the missed field goal by Ohio State, I think that there was something that I know for me, I felt like that timeout by Kirby Smart was the big indicator as to how they were able to get to that point so he can miss the field goal. What was the big play in the game for you as you sitting there watching the game?
I would have to say the same because there are games in the past, 2, 3, 4 years ago, where we would have looked and said, "Doop," because Kirby didn't take the timeout.
Fake punt.
And that cost them not just the game, but really a conference title, a national championship, just really cost them big. And it was just, you love to see when a coach has evolved. You love to see when a player has evolved and their IQ, whether that is on the sidelines or on the football field, goes up. And I felt like in that moment, we saw that Kirby Smart's IQ as that elite college football coach was on display, and that IQ has gone up from just those years, a couple of years ago. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it was the biggest play because it really spoke to, for me, it spoke to, wow, we're always talking about the evolution of a player. We're always talking about the maturity of a player and the IQ of a player. I saw the IQ of an elite football coach on display.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think we need to start moving him into that conversation, right? Yeah. As far as the Dabo Sweeneys of the world, we know his luster's kind of worn off. It's always been off with me, but I think just from a national championship conversation and being that powerhouse, so to speak, I think Georgia is in that conversation. I think Kirby's name should be in front of that. Not only for just being an elite recruiter, like he's always in that conversation, right? But I think he's right now. He is probably should be in one of the conversations for being the best college football coach in the country. Obviously, the national championships don't match up with Nick Saban. We get that. It's going to take a while for them to get there if ever happens again. If ever that happens again. Yeah. But I think just from a right now, what we see like going forward in the next couple of years, Kirby is that guy. I wholeheartedly believe that. Now, I think another person that kind of we saw evolve, is Stetson Bennett. When you think about what he was able to do, right? Like with throwing an interception, and then he was able to come back in the fourth quarter and be the mailman that he's referred to as. But I think that just from I don't know. It just seemed like for me with the offense and how things were going, it just seems like once they found Brock Bowers, oh yeah, we do have one of the best players in the country. It just seems like that offense started to flow a little bit, and then Stetson Bennett started to find his rhythm.
I think it was one of those things. It may have been a combination of things, right? Because at the beginning of the game, I said to myself, For the love of God, Todd Monken, do not try to match the tempo of Ohio State.
Yes.
You set the tempo and
Yes.
the tone.
Yes.
And I felt
Screaming at the television.
yes, I felt like for whatever
Play your game.
reason, play your game. For
Yes,
whatever
absolutely.
reason, it felt like the Dogs were trying to play Ohio State's game. If it's going to be a track meet, which it probably will be again this coming Monday, but if it was going to be a track meet on Saturday, Jarvis, I just felt like it should have been still a track meet dictated by the Dogs. And I felt
Right.
like Ohio State was dictating that. So, yeah, give a lot of credit to Stetson Bennett, but I also have to give credit where credit is due to the fact that the Todd Monken and Kirby Smart made the adjustments that Kirby Smart has also been known to make at halftime. That's also put him in the elite coach conversation, right? And then Stetson Bennett ultimately taking advantage of that by virtue of saying, okay, not only is Darnell Washington down, because I kind of had a feeling that maybe they also had a lot more of a game plan for Darnell Washington before he went down in order to kind of trick Ohio State and say, hey, you can't focus on Brock Bowers because we got another gun out there. But then when the gun went down, it's like, oh my, then what do we do? And then they remembered, by God, we are RBU. We can put Kenny McIntosh out there and put him to work.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, that then sets you up for the fourth quarter that you got from Stetson Bennett.
Yes, and you able to find some of your wide receivers in A.D. Mitchell and Smith. So all those guys were able to find their ways into the end zone. That's the thing that just really lets you know that the Georgia could be pretty scary next year coming back. But before we get to next year, we have to talk about the national championship, right? Like, so you talked about it. Like, Ohio State showed that, hey, they can run with the big dogs, so to speak. And until the Georgia made those adjustments, Ohio State looked like they were going to finish this thing and get to that national championship game and beat the big dogs, so to speak. But as they get ready to go into this game against TCU, TCU is a team that's been doubted all year. I know. I thought Michigan was going to go ahead and pull it out, and it took Michigan to throw 2 pick sixes in a game in order for them to get that done. So Max Duggan, I think I was listening to Sandra on 92.9 The Game.
Yeah.
I kind of like the nickname that she gave him, Max. Was it Max?
Max, teach me how to Duggan.
Teach me how to Duggan. Yeah, Max, teach me how to Duggan. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, so coming into this game, is this Georgia's Alabama defeat of 2021? Saying, hey, wake up call, we're beatable. Do you see that these two things kind of correlate with each other so they can get those back-to-back natties?
Oh, I do. And another one of our friends over at 92.9 diehard fan and Georgia grad, Brian Gephardt, he and I were talking this morning, and I said, I said, look here, if I could have been a fly on the wall or on the bus ride back to Athens, I know. I was like, man, Kirby lit them up. I've said, I'm sure he started drawing up plays and was talking about the game plan on the way back to Athens. But Brian Gephardt said actually that a lot of times this season, reporters have not been allowed to go into the locker room, which they were post game. And he said one of the things for him that was very noticeable was he was on the football field with them, right? And there was all the celebration and all the hoopla. But the closer you got to that locker room, the more sedate it got. And by the time they finished in that locker room, Jarvis, it was clear that they knew, it's on to TCU. That was a real nice little celebration for the last 7 minutes. Now it's game time. So yeah, I think these guys understand the assignment and they know that just like then, if you don't step it up, just like Alabama was waiting for them again, TCU is ready for them. Now, the good thing is Max Duggan is still not CJ Stroud. However, don't get it twisted. Quentin Johnson actually may be Marvin Harrison Jr. or a little bit better. So it's balancing out, but I believe these guys are going to be ready because if you're truly good, like Kirby Smart is, at in-game adjustments, halftime adjustments, then you're going to take that 9-day window of time and you're going to make the adjustments you need for what is a little bit of a suspect secondary, and you're going to make sure that they're ready to rock and roll come Monday.
Absolutely. They're going to be ready to rock and roll come Monday for sure. Kirby Smart, as we talked about, elite coaches going to have their guys ready to roll. Now, last night, the Atlanta Hawks, they took a tough one, double overtime, 143-141. Trae Young was out there dealing. They were taking advantage of some of the mismatches that they had down low, and he was running the pick and roll. But Oh, here comes Mr. They didn't have Steph Curry, but they sure had Mr. Thompson there. He was actually lighting the Hawks up in the first quarter with 16 points, a 40-point first quarter, 70 points in the first half. This was a absolute barn burner. Now when you boil down to it, it's a tough loss, but what did you like that you saw in that game last night against the Golden State Warriors from the Hawks?
Yeah, a couple things. Of course, having DeAndre Hunter back is always good.
That was a
And
good
not
sight to
just
see.
in terms of his 17 points, but it was the rest of the stat line because, I love to look down the rest of the stat line to see beyond just the offense. And it was the fact that he had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. I mean, he had a complete game basically
Right.
at both ends of the court. So I really, really love seeing that. It was not only good to see 6 players in double figures for the Hawks, but again, it was going down the stat line. Let us not overlook the fact that Trae Young also had 14 assists and get this, 7 rebounds, good people. You know
Yes.
how much I love to look down his stat line to see what his hustle looked like. And even on that last play of the game, as tough as it was for all of us to watch over and over again, as Kayvon Looney basically was like a one-man wrecking crew in the last 1.4 seconds.
20
But
rebounds.
right. But
Goodness
but
gracious.
even that, just in that last 1.4 seconds, to me, that was a microcosm of the game and the thing that
Yes.
typically dogs the Hawks the most, because even with Trae Young trailing on the back of that play, he still had his court vision. So I still got to give him a lot of credit for at least kind of looking to see, okay, where do I need to fit in on this final play, right? But again, you said what I liked, so I'm going to leave it kind of right there. And I also really, really liked Onyeka Okongwu's stat line, because we were also talking about somebody who had a good stat line for assists. That was actually a pleasant surprise. But when you're talking about blocks, 3 blocks and I think he had 3 steals and like 12 rebounds and 16 points in 38
Right.
minutes, I also really liked what I saw out of him last night.
I definitely was encouraged by the defense that they put on display from time to time. But I think that the killer for the Hawks, and this has come to display against these good teams, and I think that it's something that when you have a guy like Clint Capella out, you understand it, right? There's a sore spot when it comes to those second chance points, offensive rebounds. Like it came up to the game going into overtime, and at the end of the game when Looney put in the putback layup, and we've seen it against Chicago, against Chicago Bulls, just little things, just boxing out, it's just simple things, right? The simple things that just kill the Hawks when it comes down to crunch time.
Yeah, I just and you're absolutely right. I looked at the play over and over again, Jarvis, slow motion, trying to see where all 5 players were. And don't get me wrong, I did say there were a couple things that I didn't like, if I may. And one of the things was I probably would have called a timeout. Okay, Nate, I know you're tired of hearing us say that, but I don't know if I would have
Right.
had Bogey in on that final play, because at that point, you don't need points. You've Trey tied the game for you with a floater. So if you've got
Exactly.
one of your scorers out there, should you actually need to get back on offense, you've got Trae out there. Put
Right.
Trae or Bogey, but I don't need them both, because without Bogey out there, then I get to have somebody like Onyeka Okongwu out there on that last play. If Double O is in the paint, deep in the paint, I don't think Kevon Looney has those 4 opportunities. I don't think dude is going to have a missed shot or get the rebound from the 3-pointer that was missed and then tip it in and then misses it and then gets the offensive rebound and goes in again. I don't think that sequence happens for Onyeka Okongwu, whereas Bogey was still out at the perimeter.
Yep.
John Collins was still out of the perimeter. And I don't even get completely mad at him, by the way, for that, because at the end of the day, he was guarding Draymond Green. Only thing is, Jarvis, it goes back to what you said. It's the little things, and your basketball IQ has to tell you, however, JC, that the minute Draymond Green no longer has the ball, then you
He's
need to
no
go.
threat whatsoever.
Right,
Leaving him open at the 3-point line.
Right.
I'll be okay with you leaving him at the 3-point line for an wide open shot. Like
Yes.
I'm
Or
cool on that.
right. Or if he passes the ball for somebody else to take the 3, then
Yeah.
he's really not a threat because he doesn't have the ball. So you need to be running to the inside the way that Golden State's offense collapsed into the paint. And you need to be prepared to get, it wasn't a long 3-point rebound, but it was at least medium enough for you to be able to be under the basket. DeJounte Murray should not have been under that basket.
Trying to box out Kevin Looney.
Not at all.
Kevon Looney.
There it is.
That should not happen. Absolutely at all. So that's something that the Hawks are going to have to continue to work on, and we will see if Nate McMillan is going to be able to make the necessary adjustments, because guess what? The Kings are coming, and we know how they are as far as from a shooter standpoint, because, Mr. Red Velvet is he's been shooting pretty well this year. So
Kayvon
Kayvon has been doing this thing out there on the West Coast. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. But the Falcons got the last game coming up in the season against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, they got the division clinched, but we found out that they're going to play their starters. What does that mean for the Falcons? We'll talk about that coming up next. But first, we got to talk about betonline.net, because it's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Been looking at some of these spreads for this last game of the season, right? We got the Minnesota Vikings versus Chicago Bears. The Vikings are favored, on the road. You got the Tennessee Titans versus Jacksonville Jaguars. They're favored by a touchdown over the Tennessee Titans. What you trying to figure out? Hey, you want to bet on some ancillary games? You trying to get a little parlay going on? How about you go to betonline.net, because it is the top online source for all your sports wager information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They've got you covered. We got you covered each and every day, Monday through Friday, for all your ATL sports needs. For all your sports wager information, go to BetOnline. They have podcasts waiting just for you. So head to BetOnline today, or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today, because BetOnline is where the game starts.
Now, the game finally started to kind of slow down for Desmond Ridder as he got his first win as a rookie in the NFL with the 20-19 win over the Cardinals on Sunday. We were there to see it front and center.
Yes.
And that's exciting. But, there's still that conversation about where he is in his progression overall, right? So we only have one game remaining to really have like a quote unquote full sample size for Ridder. And the question is still out there. Now that we're 3 games in, you only got one more. Is that enough for you to say, yep, I think they have their QB1 in 2023? But if not, are you just looking for a free agent, like a QB to compete with him and to keep him honest? Or are you salivating and calling Houston saying, hey, CJ Stroud looked really good in the Benz Saturday night. What y'all want for him?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Now, I like how you posed it, because I like how you said in 2023. So the answer to that question, in 2023, should he be QB1? He should be able to compete for QB1 in 2023, because from game 1 to game 2 to game 3, I've seen progression each game. And that's what you're looking for when you're talking about evaluating quarterbacks, because we talked about the concerns, right, of him locking in on Drake London. Now, granted, we love that he's actually using him, because the guy before him couldn't figure out how to get him to rock. So, yeah, we like that part. That's check that box. All right, cool. He's actually pretty good. Drake London can play football. All right, we found that out, right? So, but now how can you go through your progressions and get other people with football? We saw him build some rapport with Michael Pruitt. I like, on the third down, you strike throwing that bad boy in there, right in between his tight coverage. And that's one thing that I said that I really liked about Desmond Ridder coming in, because he has that confidence in his arm, and he can get in there. He has the arm strength to be confident in, right? So a lot of times the quarterbacks have confidence in their arm, but they just ain't got the arm strength to get it there. So I think that there's no hesitation when they're talking about, like, if I need to fire a strike, he's going to fire that strike. And I think we saw that on Sunday. So I think that when it comes to now, if you saw him get progressively worse, or he just turned the ball over too much, and like, okay, we might need to bring somebody in. But I think just as a buffer, I would consider bringing in a veteran just to kind of push him a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Because you never want to let the guy get too comfortable. I know people don't really care for their mental psyche type of jaw-jacking games that goes on, but I think just from a safety standpoint, just a safety net standpoint, just in case, you never know what could happen. You got to bring a veteran in, to sit there and push him, and the guy have that mindset coming in, saying, hey, more than likely you're going to be the backup, and we need you to help develop this kid, and not necessarily try to beat him into the ground and not be a guy that can help him and be, help him along the way. So I think that's kind of where I am with Desmond Ridder as we get ready to go into the last game of the season.
And I think that's such a critical point because obviously last year was a little bit different. They bring in Marcus Mariota with him knowing that, hey, you have every opportunity to be the starter here, right? And of course, people's instant reaction was, well, there is Ryan Tannehill out there. But no, because Ryan Tannehill told you at the beginning of this season that he wasn't in it to be helping Malik Willis. So do you think he's going to help Desmond Ridder along? No, he's coming here thinking he's QB1. So I don't know that he would necessarily be the fit, regardless of his relationship with Arthur Smith. I agree with you. I think it has to be a veteran who is comfortable with being the second option because he's likely going to be that. And also comfortable knowing, hey, but I can jump in when I need to jump in, sort of like a Nick Foles. When Nick Foles was in Philadelphia, he knew he was the backup, but knew he was ready to be QB1 when needed, and also was willing to give Carson Wentz what he needed in order for Carson Wentz to become who he became, right? So you do need that guy. And I think we all agree that, hey, right now the Falcons are at number 7. Who knows what might happen next week? They may jump up, they may go down, but I doubt it. I'm thinking 7 or above. I don't think they're going to drop any lower than 7. And if that's the case, I'm still screaming to the top of the rafters. D lineman, defensive player, edge rusher, D lineman, defensive player, edge rusher. I'm still doing that all day.
We'll just rotate it. Like, all right, here we go.
Edge rotation. Yep. Every day. In fact, guys, what I'm going to do so you don't have to hear my mouth about it, I'm just going to put a sign here right by my Falcons jersey, and it's just going to have random defensive player, random defensive player, random defensive player. Yes. You're never going to hear from me again. But anyway, if you guys want to hear something good all day, every day that we love to tell you guys about, it's of course built.com, because when you have situations like what the heck Georgia put us through on Saturday night, then the Hawks turned around and put us through Monday night. You got to have that kind of snack that's going to be healthy for you when you need something and you are stressed out. So as always, check out built.com. That's where you can get your Built bars and those cool little puffs that have 100% chocolate. And that 100% chocolate is interesting because, hey, if you're a chocolate lover, hey, you love it. But also, if you're looking for something that has easy solubility for proteins, you're going to get 15 grams of protein that easily goes through your system. And that really does give you the energy that you're going to need for Wednesday night when the Hawks take on the Kings, or next Monday when Georgia faces TCU. Now, if you put in the Locked On 15 code, you're going to get 15% off that first order. And again, Jarvis and I were going to talk a little bit about our goals for 2023. And one of them, of course, is for us to stay healthy. So we like Built Bars because that'll give you only 160 calories per bar. Check them out. Built.com, Locked On 15 for your 15% off. Now, Jarvis, it's interesting because one of the things that we know we talked about last week and even today is the evaluation process. So not just at QB1, but even at other positions as well. Interesting decision that the Buccaneers have made already. They clinched the NFC South on Sunday, and actually made the statement, hey, we're going to still play our starters. So I was thinking to myself, now that's interesting, depending on which side of the fence you sit on, but what should the Falcons do? I mean, should they play their starters and their players as well? If not, who should they actually sit?
To be honest with you, everybody need to play. I don't see everybody need to play. And only the first person that came to mind, which I may consider not playing, is maybe Grady Jarrett. I don't know, but I'm not the person that's gonna have that conversation, and I'm sure Arthur Smith don't want to have that conversation. Hey, man, go ahead and sit out this season and come back next year. No, it's not gonna work like that. I think everybody needs to play because that's what he's trying to build in the locker room. Arthur Smith, that is, as far as type of culture, right? Getting some wins, like because Arthur Smith can care less about a draft position. They don't care about what it means to if they were to win, if they drop out of the top 10, if they get a win against the Buccaneers. I don't even think that's even possible at this point. But I think some of the things that you want to be able to establish, not necessarily momentum going into next year, but seeing getting the quarterback getting another win up under his belt. I think that's something that's going to be able to establish. And I think that you want to be able to, and from an evaluation standpoint, right? So we saw Matt Hennessy at the left guard spot. Do they bring him back? Is that a guy that, hey, we might like what we see at this left
Yeah.
guard spot right here, and that might not be something that might be a priority for us in the draft or in free
Mhm.
agency.
Yeah.
So all those things come into play when you start thinking about, okay, from a roster construction standpoint, because you got a lot of 1-year guys that you're
Yep.
going to have to really seriously consider bringing back. If you're talking
Sure.
about Rashawn Evans, are you going to bring him back?
Lorenzo
I talk
Carter,
about
yeah.
Lorenzo Carter. All those guys are on 1-year deals. So this
Mhm.
is something. This is going to be an evaluation period, not only for the Falcons, but for these guys as individuals.
Yeah.
They might be for your next team, because the Falcons,
Right.
regardless of how you play, the Falcons might be like, yeah, you know what, we're good, and you're gonna have to put some good film out there for your next team. So I think it's going to be a lot of evaluation going on in this last game, and I
Mhm.
think that the most important one for the Atlanta Falcons is to continue to see that progression from Desmond Ridder and being able to spread the ball around, be able to make throws when it's money time on 3rd and 4th downs, and be able to get a win at the end of the day.
Yeah, and to that point, I definitely don't want to see anybody on the offense except maybe Cordero Patterson, and not even really sit, but maybe used lightly. We'll say it that way.
Yeah,
Because there's been pretty much their version of load management on him, at least from a practice perspective, the entire
indeed.
season. But the rest of that offense, yeah, you got to have him in place, because ultimately, if you want Desmond Ridder to show even more growth and progression from game 3 to game 4, like we saw in the first 3 games, then you absolutely need to give him the opportunity to have his first string weapons out there so that he has every tool in the toolkit to use for himself, including Tyler Allgeier. Unbelievable back half of the season that he has had. I mean, Jarvis, you want
Yes.
to talk about QB1, but let's keep it real and talk about RB1. And yeah, we
Woo.
know Cordero Patterson was an absolute beast to begin the season, but when you're talking about the future, isn't it exciting that for once you're not actually having a conversation? I mean, we keep having the edge rushers conversation, interior lineman conversation. We're not really having a combo saying that the Falcons have to draft an RB1. Like,
Yeah, I
man,
think I think it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear Tyler Algier is the
yeah,
guy, and I think that actually works out in Cordero Patterson's favor, right?
yeah,
Because he doesn't have to be leaned on to be the RB1 at this age. So I think there's value there where you can move around Cordero Patterson, have him be targeted in the passing game a little bit more. So I think that kind of opens up the offense a little bit more
yeah,
for Arthur Smith, and that's what he's talked about, being able to be more balanced, right? Because you know what you can be able to bring to the table from a rushing standpoint. Can you pass the ball with balance? Because everybody, a lot of times the people having the opposite conversation. Like,
yeah,
okay, people pass the ball so much they got to be able to run the ball a little bit.
right.
So, and you saw the Falcons struggle with that with Matt Ryan's last year with his
Mhm,
team. So I think all of those things come into play, and with a guy like Tyler Algier coming along like he is, it's
mhm,
going to do nothing but benefit the Falcons, and
yeah.
it's going to benefit the 30-year-old running back as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And listen, these are the kinds of things that we'll continue to watch, because you guys know we started talking about our evaluations even last week. So we'll continue to kind of dig into that, especially as we hear more from Arthur Smith when he begins to talk about the Falcons installing their game plan for Sunday. Now, you guys, we appreciate you rocking with us, especially coming back in the new year. Happy New Year to you guys as well. But don't forget to rock with our guys at Locked On Sports today, because, of course, they give you immediate reaction from big games. Like, of course, who was it? Was it Damian Lillard who scored 71 last night? Like, oh, Donovan
Woo!
Mitchell?
Donovan Mitchell, yeah,
Donovan Mitchell. Yeah. So you
71
know they're
points.
going to give you guys a
Woo,
reaction on that, because we hadn't seen that in the
goodness.
month of Sundays since the passing of the late, great Kobe Bryant, who did it all those years ago. So I know they're going to be talking about that. And of course, and we're going to talk a little bit about it briefly in our next segment, but of course, they'll be giving you guys reaction to what we saw in the Bills-Bengals game last night with Damar Hamlin. So they'll give you their take on it. Any updates, any real-time updates, they will definitely share that with you. So be sure to check out Locked On Sports today after you check out ATL Day Ones at YouTube, on the Odyssey app, or wherever you download your podcasts.
And Locked On Sports Atlanta family, really appreciate you guys for reaching out and on us on the ATL Day Ones at gmail.com email. If you want to get in contact with the program, that's all you have to do. ATL Day Ones at gmail.com. But this is for the culture. It is an intersection between sports, entertainment, and the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about, because that's how we get down on this show. Today is no different. And I think that we would be remiss if we didn't touch on this particular topic, because I think you know, a lot of times we often get on, the national reporters or the
Yeah.
big 4-letter networks for, kind of glossing over what it is to be a player and everything. So I think that's the main thing though in this particular thing that I really was encouraged by
Mm-hmm.
in given the situation is the fact that they humanized Damar Hamlin and
Yes.
not necessarily looked at him as a football player and they just then move on and continue the game and as if nothing happened. I think that
Yeah.
was the main thing that I just really stood out to me initially as the thing was going on last night.
I would agree. And that's everyone from Ryan Clark to Elisa
Yes.
Salters, Scott Van Pelt, and all points in between.
Booger as
Of
well.
course,
Yeah.
this was exactly Booger McFarland because, of course, it was an ESPN broadcast.
Right.
So much credit goes to them because that was real time emotion, raw emotion that they were trying to manage through themselves because they're seeing it real time. They're having to react real time and kind of keep all of us steady because
Right.
none of us have really seen anything like that. And it's interesting because I will say this, I didn't go back to see the video for salacious purposes at all. I
Right.
had a game that I was a part of the broadcast crew for last night and unfortunately didn't watch the game. So I will admit I did have to go online just to kind of piece it together and kind of get an understanding of what happened.
Yes.
And I give them so much credit because in the beginning I saw it and I was like, what gives? Like I had to actually replay it because low key, all I saw was an excellent hit in a regular play.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it hit me like, oh dear God, that's what happened. And so
Mhm.
to see that real time, no different than maybe what some of us saw a couple of weeks ago locally with Bob Rathman.
Yeah.
Not easy to manage through
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
situations at all. And I do, like you said, appreciate so many from that broadcast team to Bill's Mafia to the Bengals leadership, those teams, everybody just understanding in that moment, like, you do know this is somebody's son, this is
Right.
somebody's nephew, this
Yeah.
is somebody's teammate, etc. That literally we don't know how it's going to go for that person.
Yeah.
So let's just pause. We do know that it was a game of unbelievable significance as
Right.
it relates to the NFL playoffs. We take nothing away from that. I mean, I don't envy the people that have to make that decision on how they're
Yes.
going to manage through that situation.
Yes.
But in the moment, yes, I agree with you. I felt like it was handled very, very well. And I felt like, wow. And I don't say this loosely, and I'm not trying to be funny, but wow, amazingly, we didn't choose violence for once. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate it because, playing a game a lot of times when you in that age range between 18 to 28, like I always kind of jokingly say, hey, that's my invincible year. Those were my invincible years where you don't think about death. And I've had a situation similar to Damar Hamlin as far as from making a play. The guy had got an we had forced the interception, and I was going to go block the offensive lineman. So hey, my guys can go try to go into the end zone, and I went down low to try to block him, and the guy,
Mm,
big guy too, and in my top of my head hit his kneecap, and I completely bonked out. I was done. Like I had no idea where I was, and I didn't know that I tried to get up and
mm-hmm.
fell down until I watched it on film.
Ooh,
And
yeah,
now that I think back to that, and I was just looking at Damar Hamlin last night, I was like, oh my God, like
yeah.
this literally happened to me. And
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, if I only got a concussion,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
out of it, but it's just like it's just things that you don't think about as a player, right? You understand, like people are talking about, oh yeah, I understand the risk. Oh, not really. Like,
yeah,
like not at that age. At
yeah.
40, yes, I understand the risk of football.
Mhm,
But at
mhm.
18 to 23, when you're out playing ball like that, like you don't think about that stuff. It never crossed your mind because you think you're invincible. So
Yeah.
yeah, to for it to bring, I was literally stuck watching the TV, like because I knew the Hawks game was on. And I'm
Mhm.
sitting up here like I couldn't change the channel because it was
Yeah,
just like, what's going on with
just
dude? Somebody
happened.
give me an update, give me something to some type of comfort. And I'm like, I couldn't
Yeah,
even imagine being his family because I was sitting there like concerned as all get. I was like, please don't let this storyline end like it looks right. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So yeah, it was a lot of emotions being evoked last night, and like I said, thankfully, the broadcast team, ESPN, and all those folks were evoking the right ones, and
yeah.
like to kind of help get through this thing. And I think that everybody did a really good job. And then I'm not gonna highlight the people that were saying stupid stuff online.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
because I
You
don't
don't
think
exist to us.
it's not exactly not on this platform for sure. So
No.
yeah, absolutely. So we thank you guys for rocking with us on ATL Day Ones and making your first listen of the day. Make sure you check out Locks on Sports today. And at the end of the day, we just make sure y'all just be safe. Y'all come back now here.